the question of how to integrate communities into the higher education discussion and society at large. So how can that be done? And there's a great international panel on this, which moves around between Sweden, Germany, and the Netherlands. So I pass the word over, and as usual, as I say, the screen.
Can you hear me? Yes, very good. It disappeared for a few seconds. Okay, so good morning or good afternoon almost. I'm not in the program, but I was originally. Then there were some changes due to the fact that the conference was moved online, but I'm here just to moderate. And my name is Mirko Varano. I'm from KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden, where I work as advisor for international projects. And we are here today to present two projects that, according to us, are addressing HEIs related topics from two different angles. And both projects were generated under the umbrella of the Cluster Network, which is a consortium of 12 European technical universities that have been operating since 1990. And under this consortium, there's a task force that works explicitly only on external funding. As I said in the pre-conference workshop, these big public technical universities very often or too seldom address HEIs related topics. They focus on technology transfer and so on. But luckily in the most recent years, we started also working more with these topics. So the first project we will talk about is called HEIs, and it's a project aiming to enabling university admission for prospective students with refugee background to facilitate their social inclusion and access to the labor market. And this will be presented by Benedetta Gennaro, who is the International Student Services and Refugee Integration at TU Darmstadt. And the second project is called INCOM, and this aims to develop customer journey for higher education institutions that will allow the different communities, and in particular the international one, to get fully integrated in the surrounding environment, so society at large again. And this will be presented by Erik de Jong, who is community manager at the Eindhoven University of Technology. I share the presentation, and you can see here, I hope you all see it. This is the cluster consortium I mentioned about, just to do some promotion. But we don't need to go into details. If you want to know more about this, you can get in touch with us later. And now I give the floor to Benedetta, who will take the first project. Just tell me next when you're going to go to the next slide.
Thank you, Mirko. Good afternoon. Thank you, Uwe, for also allowing us to be here present. It's always fun and interesting to talk about HEIs, although HEIs is finished as a project. I don't know if I heard Mirko use the past tense or the present tense, but it ended last year, and so we can reflect on it rather than talk about its progress that it's making. The first slide, Mirko already said that these two projects were done under the cluster umbrella. In this particular project, we also used the expertise and collaboration of TU Graz, the Technical University of Graz, which is if I remember correctly, I'm not very versed in cluster membership, but it's not a cluster member, but it's rather a strategic partner of TU Darmstadt. TU Darmstadt initiated the project together with a colleague. We were talking about, maybe Mirko, you can turn next slide. Together with a colleague, we were talking about refugee integration. It was it was actually April 2017, March, when we wrote the application. I started working as a coordinator for refugee integration at TU Darmstadt the previous May. And in May 2016 was at the height of the, I don't like use sort of the metaphors of inundation of refugees, because I think that brings a very bad sort of brings ideas and connotations of like flood, and instead I think one of the things that we learn also through the project is that actually having refugee students in our universities just enriches our culture and our community. But anyways, we were talking with colleagues, and what we experienced was a very high workload without a structure that would support the needs of this specific group of students who were finding themselves not only needing or wanting to start university education or continuing their education, but also finding themselves in a very difficult situation. They just arrived from mostly Syria at the time in 2016-17. The majority of refugee students came from Syria. Now the demographics have changed, at least in Germany. And they came with a lot of issues, yeah, not only in terms of university admission. And the accompanying issues that they brought with them were not exactly issues that administrative staff or professors knew how to deal with. Yeah, there were lots of, for instance, I mean, the most common post-traumatic stress disorder, for instance, or missing documentation that usually a student that applies to TU Darmstadt from Eindhoven or Stockholm doesn't have to deal with. So what we wanted after a year of working very intensively with these students, we wanted to share good practices among colleagues. And also we thought that we looked around and we realized that there were a lot of projects dealing directly with students with a refugee background. So having really with their main objective that of working with students. What we wanted to do was to actually work to share best practices or create tools that would help staff working with this particular group to improve admission rates, improve retention rates, possibly. And so that's what we focused on. We focused on training staff, training our peers. Mirko, maybe you can go to the next one. It was a project that lasted 2 years, and we produced results, of course. They're all on our websites, on EU. And we created 5 training modules. They're all online. You can see them. Some of them are that cover specific topics. Some of them are more sort of traditional state-of-the-art identification of needs outputs that almost every European strategic partnership requires us to do, but those are necessary steps in order to really focus the work, the actual training package, the preparation of training package. And one of the other important results was this toolkit or handbook for alternative admission routes to universities. And we also produced a video. You can look at all of these resources afterwards or during this conversation. But what I want to share with you is actually the idea that it was a very inspiring 2 years, I think, and not only for the work that we managed to do at the time, but also because, well, we establish good cooperations, working relationship, but also because this expertise or these resources can easily be transferred to other groups of students. And not only students with refugee backgrounds, there is certain training modules about, for instance, dealing self well-being of staff are topics that can easily be transferred to work, our everyday work. And I think what we are also seeing now is that whereas in 17, 19, we were working a little under, stress. I think the next generation of projects that came out of this first round are more focused on policy changes. And that's also something that we didn't address within UCRI, but we're actually very interested in seeing happening. So policy changes at the level of university administration, focusing on the third mission of the university and sort of implementing what we've learned in these 2 years and making sure that it becomes an operational and visible part of the university mission. I don't know what time it is, but I think I can stop here.
Yes, and I forgot to say, it's good that you mentioned it, that UCRI is concluded, so it's a more advanced stage, while income is still in progress. So it's part of it is still wishful thinking. So it's also good that they are in different phases to see what the progress could be. So now Eric can tell us about income. Feel at home.
Yes, so thank you very much. So the Income project is about welcoming internationals and nationals at our universities, and that also has a bit to do with my role at the university. I have a specific role at the Eindhoven University of Technology because I'm the community manager, and because I suppose that not a lot of universities have this function. A little bit about me. Basically, my role is to make everybody feel part of our TOE community, and more specifically, make internationals feel more welcome in our community. I have my own project within the governmental agenda of our executive board, and I have a free budget of about 100K per year to support activities, to write policy, and basically to connect everybody to each other at the university. So I have my network at the university. I know the researchers, I know the teachers, I know the students. And if you look at the focal points in my work, I'm organizing community events, which of course nowadays are mostly online, although we do manage to organize things like walks over the campus with a lot of Christmas trees, that kind of activities, which create some social interaction on campus as well. I'm trying to improve a lot of communication channels and trying to be the link, and I'm writing different policy papers. And that's also how Income started, because Income, and that's the next slide, I would like to develop and implement a more inclusive, welcoming process at all our universities, and you can see the universities below, and where students and staff from all backgrounds feel welcome in one international identity to become truly international universities. And we believe that we could actually improve the welcoming process, and by that change like the generations of students and PhDs. We're focusing on masters and PhDs within a couple of years. Because if you look at the welcoming process, and this is how we defined it, I can show us the next slide. Yes, we look at it that as a longer period of time. We noticed that at our universities, we were looking at the introduction programs, and the introduction programs are often like super good weeks where we give a lot of information to our incoming students and PhDs, and those are perceived, the ratings are always very high and they're good activities. But there's more to the welcoming process. Basically there's a phase ahead of it before arriving at your universities. It's the first 100 days where you could actually prepare people for coming and help them to come in. And there's the onboarding phase. And our idea is, well, what if we could actually manage to improve this process so that everybody feels welcome in the end? We create this kind of ambassador feeling so that everybody could indeed improve this feeling of community belonging. And the overall perception will increase after just a couple of years, because of course every year we have new students and PhDs coming in. So what are we doing right now? If you take at the next slide, we're in the first year of our project, and we set out a huge questionnaire to all our incoming master students, both national and international, and all our PhDs. And we are identifying the places where we can actually make impact. So we developed a questionnaire together with all universities to see, well, what questions would we like to ask, and that's basically reflected on the bottom. And we asked all our students and PhDs, so how do you perceive these different phases? So you can see that we have the different phases identified, and you can see in these lines, and this is an example from one of our universities, you can see that that several aspects are perceived differently by the different target groups. So for example, if you look at the international classroom environment, you see a gap between national and internationals and how they perceive it. That's actually a gap we could work on. And also you can see, if you look at the yellow line, these are our PhDs at our universities. You see that they are feeling less part of the community. So that's something we should work on. So this is basically the first step, and the next step is actually to identify so how could we improve this process. So this is like the first part of our customer journey, as we call it, that we would like to implement on our university. And of course we could learn from each other, because if you look at the culture and leisure, you see that for the PhDs, they are not that enthusiastic. It's actually below the line how they feel about how the connection is between. They rate it very low. That's actually something we could work on, but we see that we're doing a lot better with our students, so they could learn from each other. So maybe we could implement some things we learned from masters, and we could implement it for our PhD. So if you take the next slide, because that will be the end results in our deliverables in 2022. We're working on a catalog of best practices, because we could also learn from our other universities, from our institutions which have like a best practice in perhaps onboarding for PhDs. We have this full customer journey, so that you could actually link those different practices to the different phases, so that you can actually grab the project you need to implement it. We see that we have some gaps in this process, and we're not really aware of how to do that, and that's where we're going to develop training programs and invite external experts and experts from our own universities to come up with new ways and train the trainers, so that we could actually improve it at our universities. And last but not least, we would like to make this graphical, because as soon this project is quite abstract if you have to explain it, and there's a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders involved at our universities. It includes management, it includes administrative staff, that includes the teachers, that includes student bodies, and also municipalities at some universities. So we would like to make this in a graphical way, so that it's easy to compare and to see if you made any progress. So this is a bit more information about the income project.
Thank you. And of course, it will take much longer to go more into detail of these two very articulated projects. But I don't want to steal Uwe's role, but maybe I can ask a question now, because you talked about the rationale, the why you developed this project and how they were developed. But when you look into the societal impact, which were the activities, according to your mind, that made most impact, and in which way? Okay, Ukraine is concluded, so it's at a more advanced stage. Income is still at planning stage when it comes to exploitation and so on. But what was or will be the impact of the project on society at large, and on each of the target groups? Which were these target groups, or are? How will the results be exploited? And have you measured, or are you going to measure this impact, and in which way? Yes, for both of you.
Well, I could maybe start with answering that question, because when we talk about impact, and you look at skills of our students and PhDs, and the skills they would need in the real world. You could say, of course, universities are the real world. I think we would like to give them the skills to collaborate with each other, so that if they are in a situation where you get like a group assignment, that you will not choose your own friends, which is of course much easier to choose from, but that you look at the assignment and think, well, this would require like somebody, this would really require an international perspective, and I would like to take that extra step it takes to work with an international community. And I think that's also reason why we started our project. We noticed that we have a lot of internationals coming in at our universities. We have also a lot of Dutch students coming in, and even within the Dutch student body, we saw that the people from the southern part of the Netherlands would work with the people from the southern part of the Netherlands, and the people from the northern part of the Netherlands would work with the people from the northern part of the Netherlands, and it would also be like, and that's also going with the internationals, and the Asians would work with the Asians, and that's actually something you would like to combine, because we all know that you become more creative, and the results are becoming more innovative if you work together, because you have the different perspective and different angles in there. And I think this project would really help to create this community feeling, to really help to collaborate with each other, and it would, in the end, of course, impact how we look at working with other cultures as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to reflect on Ukraine, because I think in a way we do have the same goal, which is to make sure that our communities, our university communities, are inclusive environments. So where you come from, what kind of passport you have, what kind of personal history you have, are first of all seen as enriching factors and not as discriminating, but that, you know, everybody feels part of the university community. In terms of measurable impact, I think what you were asking, Mirko, I think well, we just need to wait and see how many of our students graduate from our programs. That would be a measurable impact in a way. That's our end goal, yeah, to enable at university admission, so that students, that are interested in people with refugee background who are interested in studying, pursuing an education, starting one or continuing one, can actually do that without too many administrative hurdles. And I think what it was challenging about Ukraine, the project, was that we were working within very, very different national and legal frameworks. So it was not quite possible to create a general sort of procedure that could fit each of our legal system, educational systems. But I think that one result is that maybe we're not projects anymore within universities, and we found our place as part of the admission procedures, and staff are not overwhelmed by sort of that work, that kind of work.
What I would like to, thank you very, very much. What I would like to focus on is that if I look at the HEIs perspective, the HEIs perspective in Ukraine is very direct, because you look at the international component is the refugees coming to a country. The social component is it's refugees, so it's not students yet. No? So you make them students. So it's a project like Kiron or something, very similar in the perspective on it. And by that, you of course also somehow influence the wider society around it and perceptions of refugees, probably. What I'm interested, particularly with Eric, is it says also and you described that also that income is also mainly trying to get the international people fully integrated in, well, the environment that surrounds the university, right? So that we know that people usually who go on Erasmus programs or something, they meet other Erasmus students or students at best, and they don't meet anybody who is not studying at that moment. is there, I mean, what are the, maybe it's always, for me, it's nice to have these kind of, personal experiences. Do you have any kind of anecdotal evidence from cases where you say, now this was an example where, with our work, something happened that students got better connected with our environment around the university, outside the university? That would be interesting.
Yeah, I think this thinking in maybe to start, income is a project aimed at full degree students, because we see that that's actually where we need more work, and that's why we also involve the not only the internationals, we also target the local students, because they also enter like a new phase within their program. So this is not only targeting the income for the internationals, this is also targeting the nationals, because they both should actually move toward each other. You should actually try to convince your locals to become more international. You should try to get like the internationals to be interested in the local culture. That comes from both ways, and I think to really get the local students in is actually harder than to get the internationals in, and you have to do this within the 3 months, because afterwards people have formed their groups and you lost the momentum.
And beyond the students, outside the university, because that's of course the focus, where we look at how does it happen that they not only meet the other students, but that they meet the society which lives outside the campus, which,
Yeah, that's a more difficult question. If I'm looking at, but then the examples becoming more like linked to the TU Eindhoven itself, and not too much to the project at large. And what you see is that for example, we have this great Chinese community in Eindhoven, and I became friends with one of the students, and they really managed to connect to the university and to connect to the other associations, and we helped them also to connect to the city to get some funding, and they started organizing like nice events on campus. And this, he was a PhD student, he is now back in China. And the thing is that there's now this nice friendship where he is still contacting me via Facebook chat, like, hey, I'm now back in China, and if there's anybody coming in, I would like to help them to visit Shanghai, where I live now. So please send them towards me. So you see that by actually collaborating in these kind of projects, people get more open-minded. And in this case, more specifically, we really got like the Chinese community to they wanted to do something for themselves. And we said, well, we will not fund like things for yourself only. Try to
do it also for others. Yeah.
Do it for others. And that gave this beautiful start for a more community feeling. And it was a very nice, it started out with a very nice evening where suddenly all kinds of cultures were enjoying Chinese food, which was of course sponsored by the university.
Maybe one last question we have comes from Svetlana. Thank you for sharing. She says, in terms of best practices, are these tailored for each target group? Is there any work done around profiling the target groups, for example, undergrads versus PhDs? I would suggest, it's a complex question. I would suggest that you may answer that probably in text afterwards. I would put it now under done, but you find it under the answered questions, the last one, and maybe you could type a more extensive answer to the question, because we will not have the time to answer really now in person, but you can stay on for a while as panelists so that you can answer. Okay, so I thank you very much.